Spencer Arrighetti in 5 starts in August, a 1.95 ERA, .90 WHIP, 47 strikeouts over 32 and a third innings. League winner? Maybe. He might just be. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Thursday, August 29th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Chris Towers. Today on the show, we had 5 rookies with big games. Corbin Carroll is so back. Corbin Burns has gone in the other direction. It seems like
so over.
We can only have one good Corbin in baseball at a time, I guess, and much more. But
hey. Patrick Corbin was good yesterday. Take it back.
Yeah, against my Yankees, of course. Let's jump in.
Can you believe it? Wow.
All right, Chris. There were lots of options to choose from, but you are going with Spencer Arrighetti.
I am going with Spencer Arrighetti, who took a no-hitter into the 8th inning, ended up giving up 2 hits, walking 4 over 7 2/3 shutout innings against the Philadelphia Phillies, who have been not as good offensively in the second half, but had been showing signs of life recently. 11 strikeouts. It's just been really, with the exception of that White Sox start when we were all excited to start him, it's just been gem after gem for Arrighetti in August. And it's giving me Luis Gil vibes in that when Arrighetti got called up, and it's possible I'm overstating this, but whenever I watched him pitch early on, I was like, man, the stuff is pretty good. Like, he looks like he throws mid-90s. Both breaking balls look pretty good. The cutter's solid. And it was just the command was really bad. He walked 23 in 43 2/3 innings over his first 2 months. Didn't really put together any very good starts until the end of June. And even then he bounced back or fell back in July. So nobody was really getting excited about him, but man, like you said, 47 strikeouts, 10 walks in the month of August in 32 2/3 inning or 32 1/3 innings. That's 2.78 walks per 9. This was actually his worst start in terms of walks since July 2nd. When he walked 4 as well. And it just kind of seems like, and I don't think the upside's quite as high for Arrighetti as Luis Gil. I don't think the stuff is quite as good, but it just feels like a similar spot where if he just has decent command, he can be really, really good. And the problem, as we've seen with Luis Gil this season, is command tends to come and go. And it's incredibly hard to quantify. It's incredibly hard to project. All of those things being true makes it hard to say, well, Spencer Arrighetti's just figured it out and he'll be good moving forward. But at minimum, he is 76% rostered. He needs to be 100% rostered at this point. That is 3 double-digit strikeouts in his last 5 games. He has, we mentioned yesterday, who was it?
Jeffrey Springs, I think, was it?
No. There were some that had 4 double-digit strikeout games.
Sean Manaea.
There were 9 players with 4 double-digit strikeout starts this season. Spencer Arrighetti makes it 10 now. And look, there are some pretty not great names on that list. Some guys that have had kind of outlier performances, but Arrighetti's on that list now with Chris Sale and Garrett Crochet and Luis Gil and a bunch of guys who've had really good seasons. So I think the upside he's shown over this past month is impossible to ignore.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement. Awesome August. I read the numbers up top for Spencer Arrighetti. And I remember earlier in the season, I told people just pay attention because he gets lots of whiffs, right? So Arrighetti has 3 pitches with a whiff rate of 37% or higher. So strikeouts are not a problem here. It's everything else that you mentioned, the ability to throw strikes, commanding his pitches at times. And I think if he can, throw those breaking secondary pitches with enough conviction, it'll probably help his fastball play up. His fastball is actually his best pitch in this start today. It actually generated the most whiffs. So he's capable of getting whiffs on basically all of his pitches. Good run support behind him with the Houston Astros. Yeah, we're in agreement there. Needs to be closer to 100% rostered, 76% for Spencer Arrighetti. And yesterday we spoke about 3 names, him, Bowden Francis, and Jeffrey Springs. I think Arrighetti very clearly at the top of that list.
And I think we all had him at the top of the list yesterday, right? So I think I went Arrighetti, Francis, Springs. We'll see how Francis' next start goes, but Springs has been limited to 5 innings in all of his best starts. So Arrighetti, the upside is clearly high. I'm very impressed by what he's done lately.
All right, let's talk about Corbin Carroll, who had himself a huge game, 2 for 5 with a double dong and 5 RBI. And want to focus on what's changed for Corbin Carroll. So first 85 games this season, a 210 batting average, only 2 homers, had 15 steals, a 607 OPS, 35% fly ball rate, 36% pull rate, 87.7 average exit velocity. Apologies, I just threw a bunch of numbers your way and more are coming. Last 44 games, he's batting .253 with 15 home runs, 46 runs, 37 RBI. The steals are down only 6 during that time, but obviously he's hitting for so much power. OPS is over 900.
Regarding the speed, one thing I did notice, he only has 1 steal in August. He has, I think, 23 hits in the month of August. 9 of them are homers and 4 of them are triples.
Wow.
He just hasn't had many opportunities to steal bases.
Yeah, it's not like he's gotten slower. He's very clearly still one of the fastest players in all of baseball. But remember the numbers I said before, and I'm just going to compare them real quick. The fly ball rate from first 85 games to the last 44 games has jumped from 35% to 44%. Mm-hmm. The pull rate has jumped from 36% to 49%. So putting the ball in the air, pulling it, and the average exit velocity from 87.7 miles per hour to 91.4. So hitting the ball with authority, pulling it, and hitting it in the air, that is exactly the recipe for hitting for power, and that has been the biggest change for Corbin Carroll.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal a joke that someone on Twitter made. Are you a Simpsons guy, Frank? I never know what you have or haven't watched. I know Scott has seen some Simpsons.
Yeah, but the Stampfl Rolodex is very small here. I have not watched this.
I'm going through the process of watching The Simpsons all the way through. And it hits a point around season 3 where just like every episode is like, oh my God, this one. And there's a joke where they like flash back to Disco Stew, and he's got a graph that shows disco sales going up in like 1970. And he's like, if this trend continues, and that's kind of the point we're at with Corbin Carroll. If you look at the month by month OPS, it's like 509 in April. 613 in June, 725 in July, 822 in July, 725 in June, 909 so far in August. It's basically been like 100-point jump every single month so far. And is he a first rounder again? Like, are we just like all throughout this whole difficult, frustrating season? Are we just kind of very close to back where we started?
I haven't thought that far in advance, but my early lean is I can find 12 players I would rather draft than Corbin Carroll.
I think that's reasonable. And there was a way too early mock draft that was Ryan Bloomfield put up on Twitter yesterday.
So that is actually a real draft that they're playing at. It's just a way too early draft champions, NFBC format.
Okay.
Round draft and hold. There's no waiver wire or anything, but that's a 15-team league. And
he was 17th.
I think they did the first 11 rounds of that draft. So
yeah, and Corbin Carroll was the 17th pick in that one. So I think he's in that discussion again. And that's kind of wild because I feel like people in the comments would have, I don't know, run us out of town with torches and pitchforks if we had said that 2 months ago,
and rightfully so. I mean, he
was terrible. Yeah. And like, it's still not quite back, right? Like he's only hitting like 240, 253 so far in August, 221 in July, despite those being his 2 best months overall. There's still like, you look at the launch angle sweet spot, which is a metric that we don't necessarily talk about a ton, but I think is instructive when a player is like a little lost. And what that just basically means is the percentage of the batted balls that are within a certain degree, right? It's, I don't know, 11% to 30% or something, however they define it. But that's gone from 33% in 2023 to 26% in 2024. That is a second percentile mark. So like he's still hitting a lot of grounders and a lot of pop flies. And, he's not the same guy he was last year, but yeah, I still think at the end of the day, at least in a roto league, in a head-to-head points league, you probably missed the playoffs because of Corbin Carroll, and now you're watching him carry you in what should have been the playoffs. But I think in a roto league, you're going to end up pretty happy with the final numbers.
And you know what's kind of a sneaky part of all of this? His overall line, 96 runs scored in a down season. It's August 29th, so he has a whole month left. What is that number going to wind up? 120 runs scored in a down season for Corbin Carroll. So, we'll see. Hopefully he can start running a little bit more, but as you mentioned, there just haven't been opportunities for Corbin Carroll to do exactly that in August. Wanted to give a shout out to two big performances by star players. I mean, this is what they do. Yordan Alvarez, I guess he was dealing with a neck injury, right? Over the weekend, I think it was. I guess the neck is fine because 4 for 4 with a triple dong, 4 RBI, and he is going off in August. 385 batting average, 8 home runs, a 1233 OPS. And ho-hum, just another day for Shohei Ohtani, 2 for 4 with a sock in 2 shoes. 42 homers, 42 steals, a month left. Can he get to 50-50?
Yes. I think at this point, it's like, I'd say it's like 90% likely. It's just,
you can bet that somewhere.
For me, it just comes down to like, if he gets the home runs, there's no way he doesn't get the steals, right? Like
actually, it's more likely he'll get the steals than homers, I think.
I think so, yeah. And just to on the Yordan Alvarez front, like we never talk about him, right? Like he's one of those players that's just, we only talk about first or second rounders if they're struggling or hurt. And he's had a few injury scares, but for the most part, he's just been rock solid. And it's one of those things where like you almost don't realize how good of a season he's having because of that. But like the OPS now for the season is up to 963. He's got 28 homers. He's got 75 run. Like it's been a little disappointing, I guess. Like you hope for a little better in the counting stats, but he's awesome. Like it's another one where like even the relatively quiet seasons, and this is the down season for Yordan Alvarez, are still amazing.
Yeah, I was going to point out the counting stats. He entering Wednesday was on pace for 88 runs scored and 82 RBI. That is absolutely a disappointment. But the fact that you are getting, a 300 plus batting average with, somewhere in the mid 30s home runs, I think he still could have a big month in terms of counting stats as well. Maybe a slightly down year, but still overall just a very, very good season here for Yordan Alvarez. 2 days in a row, I want to highlight an oh my goodness gracious game. Just another crazy comeback 2 days in a row. This time, the Cubs at the Pirates. The Cubs were down 10-3 by the end of the 5th inning. They came all the way back. They scored 6 runs in the 9th inning to win that game 14-10. And how did they do that? Another rough outing from David Bednar. Some bad luck, some self-imposed. I was watching this one, some questionable defense behind him, but he also couldn't throw strikes, which that's on him. He got the 9th inning with a 2-run lead. He was charged with 5 runs on two walks and 3 hits, took his 6th blown save, 7th loss. Bednar in August, a 10.97 ERA and a 2.34 whip. According to MLB.com, manager Derek Shelton would not comment on Bednar's status as the team's closer moving forward.
Here is a bonkers stat. Over the past 7 years, there have been 1,193 instances of a team leading by 7 runs in the 7th inning or later. 7-run lead in the 7th inning or later. 1,193. Teams are now 1,192-1 in those situations. That is,
jeez,
that is bonkers. Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing with David Bednar is, well, they can't leave him as the closer. They also haven't moved him out of the role yet, right? Like,
and there's a
why is this gonna be the one that loses him his job? He had a multi-run outing earlier in the week, right? Like, it's been a disaster of a season. I think in the long run, my confidence in David Bednar is not necessarily shaken. I think like a healthy offseason, he can be back and being a very good closer again. But yeah, it's been ERA's almost, is it over 6 now?
Yeah.
It's got to be over 9 in the month of August now. Yeah, it's just
approaching 11 in August.
It's outright disaster. and doesn't look like it's getting any better. It did at one point, but it's just gotten completely worse.
For the Cubs, how did they do all that damage? Ian Happ reached base 5 times, 3 for 4 with 2 walks, 2 runs, and 2 RBI. He got off to a really slow start, but the numbers are basically where they should be. 241 batting average, 23 homers, 11 steals, and 811 OPS. Pete Crow Armstrong had another huge game, 4 for 4 with a walk and 4 runs scored. Last 29 games, he is batting .330, 4 homers, 8 steals, and OPS over 900. I moved him up to my 42nd ranked outfielder in head-to-head points and my 37th ranked outfielder in Roto. We'll talk about him in a little bit. I want to compare him to another rookie who had a big game. On the Pirates side, Brian Reynolds had a big game, 3 for 5 with his 21st home run. While we're talking about the Pirates, Chris, I do just want to mention with Paul Skeens, do you think this was the beginning of the limitations for him? Because he was solid against the Cubs, 5 innings, 3 runs, 2 of those earned. He had 6 strikeouts, 82 pitches was his lowest in a start this year. And I feel like if this was maybe 2 weeks ago, he very easily would have been given another inning and he would have gotten you a quality start, presumably. But in this one, he's limited to 5 innings, limited to 82 pitches, which isn't like the worst thing. But do you think it's kind of the start of maybe his limitations?
It might be that this is what it looks like, right? Like maybe next time out, he throws 94 pitches over 6 innings. You know, like it could just be that. I don't really get it. Like the guy threw 130 something innings last season between college and the majors. I know the college, you know, he had some really high pitch outings and they might consider that more high stress than, but like they babied him early on. You know, he wasn't throwing full outings in April. And like, I guess my thing with the Pirates is like, he's going to have to throw a full season at some point. Are we really like, we can't let him go more than like 20 innings over what he was last year? I don't really understand the thought process here. It's not like there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this type of action saves pitchers. So it's frustrating, but you know, we saw with Jared Jones, there was one really annoying game where he had a no-hitter through 5 innings, I think, and they pulled him after like 60 something pitches. Mm-hmm. It might just be on a game-by-game basis, and the next time out, he might go 6 with 94 pitches, but I don't think we're going to see any 100-pitch outings from Paul Skeens moving forward. Sure.
Mm-hmm. And isn't there something, what is it, like the Verducci effect, where pitchers are supposed to increase their innings?
Yeah, 50 was like the magic number for a long time, but that was also in an era where you were trying to get pitchers to 200 innings, and I don't know if you can ever expect Paul Skeens to throw 200 innings in current baseball. Right. So I don't know, but yeah, it feels unnecessary. Like it feels like that was what April was about.
Yeah. And he's up to 136 and a third, right? He threw, you said 130 or 130.
I think it was right around 130.
Yeah. So, I mean, what's the big deal if he gets up to 160, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that seems like a pretty reasonable jump for any young pitcher year over year, just adding 30 more innings. But alas, this is where we're at. And of course, the Pirates blew Paul Skeens' win in that game. Quick reminder to sign up for the FBT newsletter if you haven't already. You can scan the QR code if you're watching on YouTube. That will bring you right to the website where you click on the FBT logo, you punch in your email address, and it's easy as that. You'll get a newsletter delivered right to your inbox every weekday for free. Let's take our first break, and when we return, the news and notes right after this.
America's Service Academies kick off their seasons right here on CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back in the news and notes. Rafael Devers has missed 2 straight due to soreness in both of his shoulders. Dave Roberts said Tyler Glasnow's progress from his elbow injury has been slow moving and indicated that Glasnow will need a rehab assignment prior to returning, which, you know, it's August 29th. That makes things a little bit dicey here for Tyler Glasnow.
He's just played catch so far, right?
Yeah, I don't think he's thrown off a mound or anything like that. So Hunter Green will not throw for 2 weeks as he waits for inflammation to go down in his elbow. Bruce Bochy said it's, quote, going to take a while for Max Scherzer to be built back up after he resumes throwing. Scherzer's been out since early August with right shoulder fatigue.
He's droppable.
Yes.
The most droppable out of that 3 for sure. But I think just if you're in one of those 24% of leagues where Spencer Arrighetti's available, I might even drop him for like David Festa.
You know, I hate for legend in the game, future Hall of Famer to go out like this, like just injured, but just feels like it happens for so many guys. And I don't know how much Max Scherzer has left. Just
look, man,
the arm,
Father Time is undefeated, and sometimes guys go out like Nelson Cruz or David Ortiz, where they just retire without ever having that ugly season. But feels like there's a lot more examples of that last ugly season or two from legends, and it's just part of the game. Like, you don't become Max Scherzer if you're not incredibly competitive and have a wildly overinflated sense of your own abilities. And like, he's probably going into the Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah.
He's beat all expectations and all odds, but yeah, it's hard to rewire that part of your brain when like you're a Hall of Famer. You shouldn't be here as is. So who is Frank Stampfl to say you shouldn't be here now, right? Like, that's just, I agree with you, but like,
yeah,
that's just how these guys are wired.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially Scherzer, like he's an absolute maniac.
Oh yeah.
But, so I get why he's pushing himself, but
you go up to Max Scherzer and tell him, "Hey, bud, you're finished."
It's not going to be me, but guess what? I'm also not going to draft him in fantasy next year.
Yeah.
So, Cole Reagans has been cleared for his next start Saturday against the Astros. He left his start on Monday due to cramping in his left calf and hamstring. Luis Gil will likely make a rehab start in 5 days. He got through a live batting practice session on Tuesday with no issues. Clark Schmidt will likely make 2 more rehab starts before being activated from the 60-day IL. The Reds are promoting one of their top prospects, Rhett Lauder, top pitching prospect, Rhett Lauder, to make his debut Friday in Game 2 of their doubleheader. He's 22 years old, was a first-round pick in last year's draft. The numbers in the minors this year, 3.64 ERA, 1.15 whip, over a strikeout per inning. He's known mostly for a really good changeup and command. He does have a good slider as well. Worth pointing out that, as he got bumped up, the numbers in AA were not nearly as good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough ballpark to pitch in. 18% rostered. What do you think here, Chris? Any interest in deeper leagues, Rhett Lauder?
Yeah, I think, look, I was the guy who was saying we should be adding Jack Leiter. Just like my thought process when it comes to these rookies is anybody with upside, I think is worth adding before their debut, just because they could be anything. Chances are Rhett Lauder is probably going to come up and not be all that impressive. Like, he was drafted as kind of a higher floor, lower ceiling kind of pitcher. Every scouting report pretty much says he's an SP4 type, but sometimes those guys surprise you. And he does have a 0.51 ERA over his past 6 starts, 0.51. Only a 9% swinging strike rate. The fastball doesn't have like great characteristics. So my expectations aren't super high, but I'm open to being surprised.
Michael Lorenzen was placed in the IL with a strained left hamstring. Thairo Estrada was placed on waivers. It's been a pretty big fall from grace after 2 very solid seasons in a row from Thairo Estrada. The Astros option Chas McCormick to AAA, another one who's taken a big step back following his breakout 2023. Miguel Andujar has been ruled out for the rest of the season as a result of a core muscle injury. And before we move on to those 5 rookies who had big games, friend of the show, David Mendelson, brought up a scenario on Twitter earlier today in one of his fantasy baseball leagues, and other people might be dealing with a similar situation. So I wanted to get your opinion on the matter. His league's playoffs started this week, and he has a 10-start limit per week for starting pitchers. On Tuesday night, Garrett Crochet threw 4 pitches and did not record an out before the game was called due to weather. It counted as a start. Should the commish allow his team an extra starter this week? Now, Scott was pretty adamant on Twitter that the commissioner should not allow an extra starter for this week. And what are your thoughts?
If I was the commissioner, I'd probably be okay with it, but it's the kind of thing where it would only really, like, you would have to get the sign off from both of the people in the matchup. And if the other guy is adamant that it counts as a start, then I guess it counts as a start. I wouldn't want to win that way, I guess.
Same.
I've been in similar situations, not like exactly the same, but I've been in situations where we like don't have a rule for how to handle things. And I tend to, as a commissioner and a player, go with some sense of fairness. I'm open to it, but I understand the idea that Because like if Garrett Crochet gets hurt after 4 pitches, I don't think I'd say the same thing.
Right. But this is a weird situation, right?
So it's an act of God, right? Like I don't know, like insurance companies don't cover acts of God, right? I don't know how to exactly think about it, but my sense is I would be fine with it, but it would have to get the sign off of the people in the league.
Yeah, I have a similar thought on this, and I know if Scott were here, I'm pretty sure he would just be yelling at us about how wrong we are on this, on our mindset on this. But yeah, I think both managers would have to sign off, the person who it happened to, the opponent as well. And I understand that rules are rules, but especially in a playoff matchup, you really want it to be decided that way. So like if it's a regular season thing, you know, maybe you're a little bit more strict on it. All right, we don't have a rule for this. But I feel like especially in head-to-head leagues and playoff matchups, there should be some kind of contingency set in place. Like we have that in my home league. We play two week matchups, right? Where if you pick up a player or someone's in your lineup and they go on the IL out of nowhere, right? Before like the first game start, you could switch him out for someone else. Like that's on free agency. You know, both teams have to agree, but we do have that kind of contingency set in place. So I think especially in a playoff matchup, you just don't want things to be decided because of like a weird fluky thing that happens like that. But that's just my opinion. And yeah, don't tell Scott because I'm pretty sure he would yell at us. Let's talk about some big days for rookies here. And we'll start with Dylan Cruz, who hit his first career home run, 2 for 4 in this one, also added a double, 2 hard hits, both over 105 exit velocity. And that's now back-to-back multi-hit games. One game he had a homer, one game he had a steal. He was leading off in this one against the lefty, Carlos Rodon. Dylan Cruz is 65% rostered. I mentioned Pete Crow Armstrong earlier, Chris. Who would you rather have, Dylan Cruz or PCA?
Dylan Cruz, especially in a points league. I would maybe with PCA the speed gives him, but like I think Cruz is just a much better or a much more talented hitter. So I would go with him. He's 65% rostered. I think that probably needs to be 100% just in case. And that home run was like Carlos Rodon must have been so frustrated because that was not a bad pitch. It was like in on the hands, you know, waist high, but not like out over the middle. And he just turned on it in a way that like we had some questions about whether Dylan Cruz was going to be able to do that. He's had more of an all fields profile as a power hitter, and he smoked that one. So that was very impressive.
Maybe I'm just sipping the PCA Kool-Aid a little bit too much here, but I have ranked him higher as of now. I updated the rankings here on Wednesday. I think long-term, there's no question in my mind. I think Dylan Cruz is going to be a better player, but just the fact that Pete Crow Armstrong has been doing this for over a month now.
Yeah. And
he's just been so dynamic.
And we've seen the adjustment, right? Like the rookies tend to need some time.
Yeah.
And Pete Crow has done that now. So Pete Crow Armstrong.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I like both
that's
a lot. It's not me like talking down Dylan Cruz. Like, you know, I think it's a really close call. If you're someone out there listening, you prefer Dylan Cruz, I wouldn't knock you for that one bit. It's just, you know, Crow Armstrong is showing power. He's hitting for batting average, the speed. There's extra bases everywhere. I would really like for them to move him up in the lineup. I think that's one of the biggest drawbacks right now for PCA, but you know, don't put too much pressure on the kid. He's hitting well right now. I would lean with Pete Crow Armstrong, but I do think it's a really close call. Let's talk about Dylan Cruz's teammate, James Wood, who ran wild in this one, 2 for 4 with 3 stolen bases. And since July 27th, last 30 games, he is batting .340, only 3 homers. Of course, we want that to be higher, but the ground ball rate is still pretty high. But 9 steals during that span, a .987 OPS. He's hitting the ball hard, and he's another one who has made adjustments, Chris. If you look at the last 30 games versus James Wood's first 21 games, the strikeout rate is way down. The ground ball rate is way down. The pull rate is up. He's still hitting the ball really hard. So another one making adjustments, and now ranked inside my top 25 outfielders the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, what did we say when he was playing earlier, you know, during those first 21 games? Like, he wasn't great, but the fact that he was decent despite hitting as many ground balls and hitting it all, you know, one line drive to the pull side in his first like 30 games or whatever it was, like that was pretty impressive. And I do wonder if like the player physically that James Wood reminds me of as a batter is Josh Bell. Like very similar. James Wood is so much more athletic, but like in the batter's box, he looks very similar. And he's another huge guy. And it might be, Josh Bell has had trouble elevating the ball consistently throughout his career. And maybe James Wood will have some similar issues, but he's so young. He's made some adjustments already that it just, it feels like the ceiling is a mile high for him.
Yeah, people are going to crush me for this, but when I watch James Wood, it kind of reminds me of Ellie De La Cruz, right? Just bigger guy, being lanky. Now, look, he's not going to run as much as Ellie. I understand that. We'll be lucky if we get half the steals of Ellie De La Cruz in one season for James Wood, right? Like if we get a 30 or 40 steal season, I think that would be the absolute max that we can get from James Wood. But just being a really tall hitter, kind of wiry, lanky dude, he's fast on the base paths. Ellie had some issues with the launch angle and raising the ball as well early on in his career. So I just see some similarities there. And obviously just lots of excitement. Look, the Nationals are coming, man. They've got some young talent on this team with Abrams and James Wood and Dylan Cruz. Obviously they have to figure out some pitching there, but man, they got a pretty interesting nucleus of hitters.
Mackenzie Gore slowly maybe starting to figure it back out.
Yeah, we'll talk about him in just a little bit. One other rookie I wanted to mention, David Festa, turned in his first career quality start, 6 innings, 2 hits, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts, had 11 whiffs on 88 pitches, and he spammed his slider in this one, leaned all the way in, 47% usage, and it was a pretty good pitch for him. Since being recalled on July 24th, Festa has a 3.06 ERA, a 1.05 whip, 43 strikeouts over 32 1/3, and I feel like it's just kind of flown under the radar here. Widely available, 28% rostered. What do you think about David Festa?
And what's really interesting about this start is before this, the changeup had been the really special pitch. He had a 46% whiff rate with the changeup since getting called back, 42% overall. Had been throwing that more than the slider since his recall. So the fact that he felt comfortable enough with the slider to throw it 47% of the time, got 5 whiffs with it, 5 of his 11 whiffs. He looks like an uncomfortable pitcher to go against. He's tall, 6'6", gets down the mound. I think he's pretty interesting. He's showing some really interesting characteristics, and the fact that the slider worked as well as it did as a primary pitch bodes really well. I'm kind of interested in David Festa, not nearly on the level of Spencer Arrighetti or, but like I'd add him over Rhett Lauder, for instance.
Yeah, I would add Festa over, like Jack Leiter is more rostered than David Festa.
Yeah, I'd rather have Festa than Leiter.
I would much rather start Festa right now than Jack Leiter.
Absolutely.
And we were talking beforehand, the Twins kind of have a type, right? Like this big, tall, right-handed pitcher that gets down the mound. Festa's a big dude. Bailey Ober is huge. He's like 6'8".
Yeah.
And I just looked up Zebby Matthews, 6'5". So another guy that's like really big, right-handed pitcher, gets that extension. So the Twins have a type. It's worked out for Bailey Ober. Hopefully they can coach up some of these guys, Festa and Zebby Matthews as well. I do agree. I think Bowden Francis, Arrighetti, and Jeffrey Springs are ahead of Festa. But once you get past those 3, he might be the most interesting.
Yeah, it's a lot of like Osvaldo types.
Like Festa or his teammate, Zebby Matthews?
Festa, I think.
I think so too. Let's continue on with waiver wire pitchers. A huge game from Brian Bayo. Best start of his young career. 8 shutout innings, 2 hits, 1 walk, 9 strikeouts, 15 whiffs on 97 pitches. And he changed things up in this start. He led with his slider. He threw it 37% of the time. 8 starts in the second half now. It's a 3.42 ERA and a 1.18 whip. He's quietly been pretty good. Brian Bayo, 76% rostered. Who would you rather have, him or David Festa?
I would rather have Festa than Bayo. Because like this was the first start out of 5 in the month of August where Bayo had fewer than 3 walks. He finishes the month with 28 strikeouts and 30 innings, 3 ERA. That's pretty good, but 14 walks is pretty tough. And obviously it's been a very tough season for him overall. I don't know, maybe like throwing the slider more can help. Maybe it gives him, more of a swing and miss pitch. He throws the fastballs a little less, and maybe that's an answer. He's always had, the very good changeup, and he's been looking for that third pitch. And you can squint and sort of see a Luis Castillo career trajectory where
I always thought Framber Valdez.
Yeah, no, I'm talking specifically with the pitch mix, though, because remember, Castillo, when he came up, had this awesome changeup, and it was just like figuring everything else out. And Bello goes super sinker heavy, but it's not really a good pitch. I wonder, would he be better off fading the sinker for the four-seamer? I don't know. Maybe that, what you're talking about would be the Framber Valdez path of just spamming sinkers and getting a lot of grounders. But the one thing Framber does really well and, is get a lot of, kind of chases on pitches, not necessarily swings and misses, although lately, yes, tons, but a lot of weak contact by generating chases on pitches just outside of the zone. I don't know if Framber Valdez has that or Brian Bello has that same ability. So I do wonder what it would look like if he traded the sinker for the four-seamer, but I don't know if that's going to happen either. So it might have to come down to the slider and change up more than anything.
Let's do a little beat the waiver wire looking ahead to next week, because the matchups, it looks like both Festa and Bello are going to be 2-star pitchers for next week. Festa is at Tampa Bay and at Kansas City, and Bello is home against the White Sox, but also at the Mets.
Probably.
It's tough.
Tampa Bay is a really good matchup. Obviously, at KC is pretty tough, though.
Both guys have one good matchup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I just like Festa better, so I think I'd go with that.
I think that's fair. The next group of waiver wire pitchers, Andrew Heaney, solid at the White Sox, 5 innings, 1 run, 2 strikeouts. He gets the Angels next week, so another one with a good matchup. Mackenzie Gore has turned in back-to-back quality starts after a very rough stretch for him. 6 innings, 2 runs, 6 strikeouts, 14 whiffs on 102 pitches up against the Yankees, but he is at the Marlins next week. And Osvaldo Bido continues to pitch well. He was at the Reds, 6 innings, 2 runs, 5 strikeouts, 12 whiffs on 84 pitches. I feel like we haven't really given him the time of day, but his changeup looks awesome. The slider looks like a pretty good pitch as well. He's having a really, really good month of August, 1.55 ERA, 0.79 whip for Osvaldo Bido, and 2 great matchups next week, the Mariners and the Tigers, man. I can get behind that.
Yeah, I think he's a viable streamer. I'm not sure Osvaldo Bido is much more than that, although it's possible I'm not giving him enough credit, right? I see pretty mediocre, middling strikeout rates, bad control overall, really good quality of contact. But that's a very small sample size, obviously. We're dealing with, 45 innings over the course of the season, 50 innings, something like that. So I don't know how much I buy into it. But yeah, with those matchups, I think it's reasonable to stream Bido, especially in any points league. He's RP eligible too, right? He's a SPARP.
I thought he was, but I looked it up earlier and it turns out he's not.
Okay. That's surprising because he was pitching out of the bullpen for a little while, but maybe he just didn't make enough appearances. Yeah. I don't know.
With the other 2, Mackenzie Gore at the Marlins next week and Andrew Heaney versus the Angels, I think both could also be in play for streaming.
Yeah. So Gore, you look at the pitch level data and he was up 0.5 mile per hour over his season average with his fastball, 96.6 miles per hour. It's actually even more impressive than that because in August before this start, he was averaging 95.1 miles per hour. So compared to the rest of the month, he was up 1.5 miles per hour. And I want to say, I didn't get a chance to look this up, but I want to say there was something a few starts ago that Scott mentioned that he was working on. He was struggling with his command and mechanics. There was a quote from Matt Nat's GM Mike Rizzo on what he's seeing, and he said he was struggling with his mechanics. The fact that Mackenzie Gore's velocity was back to where it was in April when he was really good, got 14 whiffs, the fastball looked really good. I think that's very promising. So I know it's been a rough couple of months for him, but I would be okay streaming Mackenzie Gore against the Marlins. They've been one of the worst teams in baseball against lefties.
Yeah. So we've talked about 5 names that are possible streamers for next week. If I'm ranking them, I would go Festa versus Bayo is really close. I'll say Festa, Bayo, then Beto because he has the 2 really good matchups, and then Mackenzie Gore and Andrew Heaney.
Yeah, I would go Gore ahead of Heaney, but that order sounds right. Yes.
All right, let's quickly talk about Jack Leiter's return to the Rangers. He was a little bit inefficient here at the White Sox. 4 innings, 6 hits, 3 runs, 2 of those earned, had 4 strikeouts, 10 whiffs on 83 pitches. The fastball velocity was up. He averaged 97.2 miles per hour, and he threw 67% of his pitches for strikes. I thought those 2 things were very good signs here from Jack Leiter, but obviously the overall line was a little bit underwhelming.
Yeah, 10 whiffs on 47 swings. That's not what you're looking for. The fastball, I think, was underwhelming is the right word. 4 whiffs on 26 swings. That's not going to get it done, especially because when they did make contact with it, 93.8 mile per hour average exit velocity on 8 pitches. It was, I was perfectly willing to give Jack Leiter a chance, take a flyer, see if it worked out. Didn't work out. It's totally fine to go out and drop him now. If you had him and Mackenzie Gore's available, I'd do that. David Festa, I would do that. If maybe there's some league where Spencer Arrighetti's available and Jack Leiter's rostered, it seems unlikely, but maybe absolutely do that. But yeah, I think it's perfectly fine to drop him. By the way, I don't know if we've decided who to do for tomorrow's prospect spotlight, but oh my God, did you see Kumar Rocker's AAA debut?
I did not, but I know everything leading up to this has been pretty awesome.
He faced 16 batters. He retired 15 of them, struck out 10. Ooh. The slider was out of control. Wow. I don't think he's going to get called up this year, but wow, Kumar Rocker looked awesome.
And what a great story, man. Like, a generational kind of pitching prospect coming out of college. Had the whole fiasco with the Mets where, they didn't sign him because of the injury scare. It turned out the Mets were right because obviously Kumar Rocker needed surgery, but he had the surgery. There were many doubts. I mean, people have basically written him off, and now he's come back, and it's a really small sample size, but he has been lights out so far. So rooting for Kumar Rocker. Hopefully he can, keep this thing going and hopefully make a debut with the Rangers sometime next year. Let's take our final break, and when we return, we will talk about some waiver wire hitters right after this.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
Welcome back in. Let's talk some waiver wire hitters. And I do have 2 other outfielders outside of Pete Crow Armstrong and Dylan Cruz. We know lots of excitement with those guys. Lawrence Butler is heating up again, 2 for 5 with a sock and a shoe, his 16th home run, his 12th steal. Last 7 games, he's batting .357 with 3 homers and 2 steals, 60% rostered, and he has 7 home games next week. Jock Peterson has quietly been awesome. 30 games in the second half, .313 batting average, 8 home runs, 2 steals, and 1151 OPS. He also has 7 games next week. The problem looks like 4 lefties on the schedule for Jock Peterson. Chris, how would you just rank all 4 of these guys? Pete Crow Armstrong, Dylan Cruz, Lawrence Butler, Jock Peterson.
Yeah. Jock Peterson has 35 plate appearances against lefties. He has 1 start against a lefty. So if it's just for next week, I don't think he's in that discussion. I would probably go Cruz, Butler, PCA, and then Peterson. But I think the top 3, especially like Peterson, 66% rostered, is probably around the ceiling for a guy that's just absolutely not an everyday player. The rest of those guys, I think all are, if they're in your league and you need an outfielder, they're all worth a look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jock, I did move up to my 51st ranked outfielder, which sounds aggressive. It's right behind Kerry Carpenter. I think those guys are really, really similar players right now. So, I'd Probably not in 3 outfielder leagues, but any 5 outfielder leagues, those guys need to be rostered. Zach Geloff is someone who's quietly had a strong August. He went 2 for 4 with 2 steals and 2 runs scored. And in the month, he's batting .253 with 3 homers, 7 steals, a .739 OPS, 46% rostered. Chris, do you think that number needs to be higher for Zach Geloff?
Sorry, I usually want to mute myself when the cat feeder goes off.
No,
But
yeah, I noticed that you do that. I don't think you need to. I think people like to hear the cat feeder.
Someone told me it was unprofessional.
I mean, we're doing a podcast at like 2 a.m. here, guys. Like, what are we talking?
The cat's got to eat, because if they don't eat now, they're breaking down the door in an hour.
I was going to say they're going to eat you if they don't eat their food.
So, what was the question? Sorry, Zach Geloff.
Yeah,
I don't see much reason to go out and add him. We've done this a few times this season. Obviously, we did it at the beginning of the season. Quality of contact is still very bad. He still has to sell out for what power he can get to. I don't think he's someone who needs to be rostered much more than he is. And he might be too rostered at this point.
Yeah, I'm looking at other second basemen that are in a similar range in terms of roster rate. And David Hamilton, 48%, I'd rather have him. Gavin Lux at 48%, I'd rather have him.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Edman at 57%, I'd rather have him. So, yeah, I think that's how we get to Zach Geloff at 46% rostered. And one name in deeper 5 outfielder leagues, you might not believe me, but Andrew Benintendi is having a good August. .256 batting average, 6 homers, 15 RBI, 1 steal, and a .912 OPS. He's 13% rostered. 15-team roto leagues, 5 outfielders. Chris, can I interest you in Andrew Benintendi?
No. I think if you're in the situation where adding Andrew Benintendi might make sense for you in 2024, you probably have bigger okay, I don't know. Maybe Andrew Benintendi can keep his good August up and help dig you from 14th to 12th place in your league. I don't.
Every little bit counts, man.
I'm sorry to be mean, but yeah, I don't like. He had 4 homers in 3 games a few weeks ago, and then had like 7 hits in his next 12 games, if I'm eyeballing it correctly. It just, I don't see anything there.
Hey, I just had to ask.
You have to ask. I understand.
For my Andrew Benintendi fans out there, before we get to leftovers, let's take a look at 2 pitchers who have been struggling lately. What's going on with these 2? Tanner Bybee up against the Royals, 5 innings, 5 runs, 6 strikeouts, 3 homers allowed in this one. Did have 14 whiffs on 99 pitches, but a hot day in Cleveland. The ball has been flying out to right field all season long. I think Tanner Bybee kind of got doomed by that a little bit in this one. He only has 1 quality start in the second half.
Yeah.
Strikeouts are down quite a bit, 7.8 K per 9 in the second half. And the other name here is Corbin Burns, who I'm going to call it a weird start. I know he technically was, gave up 6 runs, but only 1 of them was earned. 5 innings, 4 strikeouts. He had some bad defense behind him. He still had 19 whiffs on 94 pitches. Maybe I'm making excuses. He's had a bad August. There's no doubt. 7.36 ERA and a 1.60 whip. Chris, what's going on here with Corbin Burns and Tanner Bybee?
So with Tanner Bybee, the one thing I wanted to keep an eye on was the velocity, but that doesn't really, overall in August, it's been right around 94.5 miles per hour, which is where he typically is, give or take a half mile per hour. So I don't think there's really anything there. Maybe the changeup and curveball haven't been quite as effective as of late. The whiff rate on those pitches has been below 30% in both July and August. I don't know. It just sort of feels like Tanner Bybee, on the whole, has just been meh this season. Worth having around, not terrible overall. 3.65 ERA, 1.13 whip. Strikeouts are decent enough, but not the leap we were hoping for, certainly. Arguably a step back, in fact. So I don't know. I don't see it. Nothing jumps out when I look at the August splits, but nothing similarly jumps out to make me think that he's about to turn it around. And you said only 1 quality start, only 1 start of 6 innings. since the All-Star break in 7 starts. So that's concerning as well.
What do you think about Corbin Burns?
I mostly think that this is just a run where he's either not pitching well or just getting bad results, but not necessarily like something I'm super panicked about. But it's been clear all season that he's not the same guy. It was clear when he had a 2.47 ERA at the end of July and was still getting great results, but the strikeout rate's been down all year. The whiff rate on the cutter is down to, before this started, it was down to 17% for the season. Last year, it was 23%. 2022, 28%. 2021, 32%. That was obviously it's like the opposite of the Corbin Carroll monthly OPS chart, where it's just gone straight down every year to a point now where it's just not a great pitch. It's gone from being a really special pitch to just kind of okay. Still does a really good job limiting hard contact. Still has a phenomenal team backing him up. Great home park. I just think it's probably more, the ERA is at 3.23 now. It's probably more that moving forward than true ace production.
I am very interested in Corbin Burns' free agency to see how this
30-year-old, clearly on the decline, wants 8 years. He's a Boris agent.
Yep.
He was definitely going to ask for $200 million, and he probably still will. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable giving him 5 years, $100 million on a big market team. I'd do that if I was the Orioles. Hell yeah. The 1 year with a $30 million option contract that he's going to end up signing in February is going to be a tough look.
Please no. I did want to quickly look up the contract that Carlos Rodon got, because obviously
it was $150 million over 8 years, right?
6 years, $162 million, $27 million AAV.
That,
if Carlos Rodon got that kind of seems like the floor for Corbin Burns.
Carlos Rodon's last season before free agency was a lot better, but obviously Burns has a much longer track record. That might make sense. Yeah.
I could see
6,150, 7,180, something like that. Yeah.
175, right? 25 mil AAV, something like that.
But he's not getting the Garrett Cole contract.
No, I do not see that happening for Corbin Burns. Some pitching left over is Chris Sale just keeps on plugging away at the Twins. 6 innings, 1 run, 6 strikeouts for him. Freddie Peralta was awesome up against the Giants. 6 shutout innings with 8 strikeouts, had 17 whiffs on 105 pitches. Luis Castillo was okay up against Tampa Bay, 5 2/3, 2 runs, only 4 strikeouts, but had 19 whiffs on 97 pitches. So feels like he was deserving of more strikeouts in that one. And Joe Musgrove, a quality start at the Cardinals, 6 innings, 3 runs, but only 3 strikeouts. Chris, anything to add on Musgrove, Castillo, Peralta, and Chris Sale?
Yeah, I mean, you said Chris Sale keeps plugging away. There was a start maybe last week, a couple starts ago, where I didn't mention him in the newsletter. And I got an email why didn't you write about Chris Sale? And it's because this, it's a dog bites man story at this point, right? He's going to win the Cy Young. He's going basically 6 innings with 1 earned run every time out. I'll write about him if he gets rocked. But at this point, I don't really have anything to say. He's awesome. Freddie Peralta, I'll take any good start I can get from him at this point, because it's been a really frustrating season. Good to see the fastball playing up in this one. That had not been there the same way we've gotten used to, but he's also always been, kind of the right-handed Blake Snell. He goes through these stretches where he's dominant. He goes through these stretches where he's just not very good. And at the end of the day, you're pretty happy you have him on your team. It's just, you kind of have to just cover your eyes along the ride. So that's, if he had an unbelievably good September, I would not be surprised at all. And then Luis Castillo, just okay. That's kind of the Luis Castillo story at this point. It's just everything's gotten a little worse. I'm surprised he hasn't gone back to the changeup just to see. because that, obviously has been a very, very good pitch for him in the past, but he's kind of ditched it since getting to Seattle. And, the fastball, we're reaching a point of diminishing returns. I wonder if that's one possible move for Luis Castillo.
Chris Bassitt had his best start in a while, and for anyone who actually had him in the lineup, you could thank me because I benched Chris Bassitt.
I benched him too.
You see at Boston on the schedule, and let's see, his previous 9 starts before this, a 6.80 ERA and a 1.53 WHIP. He just goes out there, 6 2/3 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts, 17 whiffs on 102 pitches. He threw more sweepers in this one, and it clearly worked. So maybe this is something that can help Chris Bassitt finish strong.
He's sort of like Jose Barrios in that it's just like, it's never quite clear why things go wrong. It's never quite clear why things go right. It's just, at the end of the day, you probably feel okay about Chris Bassitt in your lineup after the season. The ride there is bumpy.
Mm-hmm. And I don't think I ever had Chris Bassitt on fantasy teams, but I always remember like previous years doing the podcast, it's like, oh, look at this awesome stretch that Chris Bassitt is on. And then, I drafted him in a few spots this year, and it hasn't been the most fun experience. It also,
it's been more bad than good so far.
It's been a bad year for him. It's been a down year compared to previous years, but not the best from Chris Bassitt. Maybe he could finish strong after this one. Wanted to mention Carlos Rodon, who hit a speed bump up against the Nationals, 5 2/3 innings, 5 runs, had 8 strikeouts. Still getting lots of whiffs, 16 whiffs on 100 pitches in this one. His last 6 starts before this, it's 2.67 ERA, 107 WHIP. Also notice he has some really stark home road splits. So maybe that's something you keep in mind when deciding start or sit on Carlos Rodon.
Yeah, from what I saw, watching the highlights and looking in the data, this was a pretty good start, and just the results didn't quite go his way. But I wasn't too alarmed. I think he's fine.
Some hitting leftovers. Vinny P.
Baby.
Vinny Pasquantino, 4 for 5 with his 19th home run. He had 4 hard hits in this game. He is having a big second half. 303 batting average, 8 home runs, 843 OPS. William Contreras has picked things back up in August, 289 with 7 home runs and a 1018 OPS. Julio Rodriguez homered on Wednesday, but he has been quite bad since returning from the IL. 15 games, 190 batting average, only 1 homer and a 559 OPS. And despite missing some time, Jazz Chisholm has been great with the Yankees. Maybe not defensively. I think he has 5 errors in his last 3 games, but 2 for 3 with a sock and a shoe. His 22nd home run, his 28th steal, 20 games with the Yankees, 304 batting average, 9 homers, 6 steals, and an OPS approaching 1,000 for Jazz Chisholm. Some bullpen updates for the Royals. Lucas Erceg entered in the 7th inning with runners on first and second, a 2-run lead. He gave up 3 singles. He allowed 3 runs in. He was charged with his 4th blown save and 4th loss. I get why teams do this. They want to use their best reliever in the biggest spot in the game, but obviously it sucks for fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, more often than not, the 9th inning will be the biggest spot.
Yeah.
And so it's unfortunate that he didn't get it today and didn't get a save. The way he pitched today, he wouldn't have gotten a save anyway. So, I guess you can't feel cheated there.
For the Guardians, Emmanuel Clase pitched a clean 9th inning for his 39th save. For the Rangers in game 1 of their doubleheader, Kirby Yates walked 1 but struck out 2 for his 24th save. For the A's, Mason Miller gave up a hit and a walk, but he struck out 2 for his 23rd save. For the Nationals, Kyle Finnegan had a 3-run lead. He gave up a hit and walk, but picked up his 34th save. For the Red Sox, Kenley Jansen struck out 1 for his 25th. For the Padres, Robert Suarez got the bottom of the 9th against the Cardinals. The game was tied. He gave up a run on 3 hits and took his 2nd loss. For the Brewers, Devin Williams struck out 1 for his 6th save. For the Dodgers, Michael Kopech struck out 2 for his 12th save. And I am just seeing now that Justin Martinez struck out 1 for his 7th save. Chris, who do you like?
That was Edwin Diaz blew the save in the... He was going for a 4-out save. Gave up the... I think, did he give up the grand slam to Corbin Carroll?
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Yep, grand slam.
Yeah.
Edwin Diaz has given up some big homers recently, too.
Yeah, he's had a handful of blown saves. I'm not particularly worried about it, but the ERA is up to 4.30. And then, so yeah, that was the other side of that game. Martinez is the closer. Sure looks like Michael Kopech's the closer.
Who do you like more, Martinez or Kopech?
I don't know how strong the job security for either of them is. I don't know who I think is better either. Kopech's obviously been awesome for the last month or so, but I think I would go Martinez. But I think most people would not agree with me.
I have them back to back in my rankings, but I forget which one is ahead. So I am trying to pull it up real quick. And
I say don't look at it. It's Schrodinger's closer rankings, and just whichever one has a better game at any point, you can just claim that's the one you have ranked higher.
Here you go, Chris. People might not agree with you. They might not agree with me either, because Justin Martinez one spot ahead of Michael Kopech in the rankings. To stream or not to stream on Thursday, we have Bowden Francis, who's at the Red Sox. Ryan Nelson gets the Mets. David Peterson is on the other side at the D-backs. Hayden Birdsong and Aaron Savali are facing each other.
Would really prefer not to use any of them, even though there are some names I really like there, like Ryan Nelson and Bowden Francis especially. But those matchups, and even David Peterson, who's been really good lately at Arizona, it might work out for all three of them, but I just don't like the matchups for what are ultimately, I think, still pretty marginal starters.
And on Friday, we have Colin Ray at the Reds. Rhett Lauder is making his debut against the Brewers. Martin Perez at Tampa Bay. Ben Lively gets the Pirates. JP Sears at Texas. I don't love any of these, but if I had to choose, I would probably say Lively against the Pirates, Martin Perez at the Rays, and JP Sears at the Rangers.
Yeah, I think those would be my favorites, and I might like the top two more than anybody on Thursday.
All right, we are going to wrap there. For Chris, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.